Okay, so I asked you to make a list of anything that you recycle or anything that you use that's made of recycled materials, or in some of the advantages or disadvantages of each item. Let's see what you guys came up with. I'll lock everybody out. So paper, recycled from other papers, napkins from other paper materials. I don't know if I'd want a recycled napkin. That'd be kind of, it's like recycled toilet paper. Nobody wants that. Water, right, has gone through the cycle for sure. That is just hurtful. I don't recycle ever. That's not good. I use milk with cereal, the container in the cereal box. Okay, I'll recycle that, gotcha. Drink from a water bottle, grocery bags, paper, grocery bags, bottles, cardboard, Ziploc bags, water bottle, trees, tea. Oh, recycle tea. Oh, you reuse the tea bag? Okay. Oh, gotcha. Tea is TEA anyway. Or this could be like a golf tee, right? You reuse it, you use it more than once, right? Okay. Yeah. Who doesn't? Everybody does, right? Bottles, everything, right? Plastic saves oil for sure. There aren't really any disadvantages besides that labor is needed to recycle them, but that's a job. That's good. Bottles and plastic. So a lot of stuff. So today we're going to talk about two things that are recycled today: water, CO2, and oxygen, carbon and oxygen, sorry. And then tomorrow we'll talk about nitrogen and phosphorus cycle. So the water cycle, you guys have seen this before. This is no new thing. We understand how the water cycle works. The water cycle continuously moves water between the atmosphere, land, and the oceans. Water vapor, we know, condenses when it gets really high and cool and then falls to the earth as precipitation. Sometimes it's rain, sometimes it's sleet, hail, snow, but it's precipitations. Now some of the water percolates into the soil, and if you think about percolation, I think of coffee because water percolates through coffee grounds, but it seeps through the ground the same way and it becomes groundwater. Okay? You know, coffees are called percolators, right? Did you know that? No. Well, now you know. It's also a dance from the '80s. It's called the percolator. I was from northern Michigan. We didn't do those rap dances. We didn't know how to do them. Yeah, but not right now. So other water runs across the surface of the earth into rivers, lakes, and oceans. So if water hits the land and goes with gravity, we call that runoff. And if it doesn't sink in, we call it runoff. But then the water is heated by the sun again, anything on the surface, and it eventually will evaporate, and eventually it will condense and fall as precipitation, and that just keeps going. Now, if the water evaporates from plants, we call it something else. We call it transpiration. The plant transpires. We perspire, right? Plants transpire. Really, we could put perspiration in here too, but transpiration is like plants sweating. When they open their stomas to take in gases, they release water as vapor at that point. So it looks something like this, and I'm going to have you draw this in a very special way in our cycle project that we're going to start here at the end of the hour. I'm going to have you pick a biome and do a different thing. So we're going to start that today. But we understand water will evaporate, then condense, precipitate, percolate into the soil, become groundwater, or run off and become a lake or a stream, and then eventually a larger body of water. Okay, we call that process infiltration if it percolates and runs through the ground into the large body of water. That leads to underground aquifers, and probably remember some of that from earth science, hopefully. Then we have the carbon and oxygen cycles. I cannot separate the carbon and oxygen cycle because they're too interconnected. So the carbon and oxygen cycle are critical for life on Earth, and their cycles are tied closely together, so we talk about them together. Now the carbon cycle is that continuous movement of carbon from the non-living environment into living things and then back. And we know that plants, animals, and other photosynthesizing organisms play an important role in cycling carbon and oxygen through an ecosystem. Now, I'm going to ask you a question and see what you come up with. Where do plants get all of their carbon from? Where do plants get all of their carbon from? Where do plants get all of their carbon from? Answers in 5, 4, 3. This? 2, 1. Oh, the cycles? Oh, that's because they're fun. Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. All right. See what well, that's good. It's pretty important. People breathing out. Okay. Roots. Humans breathing. Close. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You got to pick one or the other. Well, they partially get it from us, right? They get it from they get it from themselves too. We'll talk about that later. But plants get their carbon from the atmosphere. This is the answer I was kind of looking for. So plants get their CO2 from the atmosphere, not solely from us. So we're just a small portion of the CO2 that gets released in the atmosphere. There's way more that we make from burning a car or burning fossil fuels. Burning a car. Don't burn your car up. Okay. So I'm going to ask you one other question. What do plants breathe in? What do plants breathe in? What do plants breathe in? I did not. No, I did not. This might be a trick question. What do plants breathe in? Final answer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so I knew you all were going to put CO2. What if I told you that's a lie? Plants do not breathe in CO2. They take in CO2. What do plants breathe? What do plants breathe in? Let me ask you again. What do plants breathe in? You don't learn if I just tell you. You forget. What do plants breathe in? See, this is a misconception I have to get rid of right now. Okay. Write it down then, if that's your answer. Oh, okay. We'll talk your neighbor into that. Okay. Nothing. Ooh, I like oxygen. Yeah, oxygen, right? Okay. So the thing that you guys have been told up until this point is plants breathe in CO2, right? And they breathe out oxygen, which is a complete fallacy. That's wrong. Plants breathe in oxygen just exactly the same way we do. Their cells use oxygen to breathe. It's called respiration. Plants breathe. Don't believe me? Stick plants' roots in water. What happens to the plants? No, like put them in water. What happens to the plant? You drown it, right? And suffocate the plant. What happens if I put your head in water? You drown and die, right? Okay, so the first thing I want you guys to identify is that plants go through respiration the exact same way we do. They use oxygen. Now, they take the oxygen in differently. They take it in from their roots. Okay? That's why we do what to fields before we plant? We rotate the soil to put air in the soil. We're literally oxygenating the soil. Yes?
Why do we put flowers in water?
Well, they need a little bit of water. Too much, though, too much water, you'll drown them. Okay? They do take water in through their roots, too. So let's talk about something else, though. That's respiration. So the first thing you guys need to know, plants breathe just like us. Second thing, they make their food differently. Okay? Can we make our food? No. We are a consumer. Plants are producers. Plants make their food through a process called photosynthesis, right? That's when they remove CO2 from the air. They do not breathe it in. They take it in. Okay? Don't say breathe with CO2 in plants because it's wrong. Plants breathe like we do. Okay? So they take CO2 in, and then a byproduct of that is oxygen, of that photosynthesis process. Here's the thing. The total amount of oxygen they make and the total amount of CO2 they make is different. They make more oxygen than CO2, so we say they give us oxygen. So scientists and teachers incorrectly say, and I wish they wouldn't, that they are the lungs of the earth, because they breathe just like us, right? But they say they're the lungs of the earth just because they give us the oxygen. But it creates this huge misconception with plants. Yes?
Yeah, but what if we didn't have plants or like grass?
Oh, they're extremely important.
Like I know that.
Oh, yeah.
But we wouldn't be like.
No, we wouldn't. Here's what they do. Everybody, look up here real quick. We'll just say this. Let's say a plant makes 10 oxygen molecules, and let's say they make 5 CO2 molecules, because they're going to make CO2. They breathe and they breathe out like us too. Okay, their waste product is CO2, but their waste product of photosynthesis is oxygen. So let's say they have 10 oxygens and 5 CO2s. We have a net gain of what? 5 O2s, right? So they make a net gain of oxygen. And that's why we say plants are the lungs of the earth, because they give us more oxygen. But there's 2 processes involved. And that's important to understand, because we're going to study both of them this year in way more detail than you really want to. But we really have to understand that there's 2 very different things happening here. And I start planting that seed now for later. No pun intended, because we're talking about plants, right? Okay. So plants use the CO2 in the air to build organic molecules during the process of photosynthesis. Now, during photosynthesis, oxygen is released into the surroundings. Notice I say released and not breathed out, right? Now, many organisms, such as plants, use oxygen to help break down organic molecules, which releases energy in CO2, and then plants can use the CO2 in photosynthesis. So yes, plants are actually using the CO2 they make to go through photosynthesis. So everybody said, I asked you the first question, where do plants get their CO2 from? Everybody said humans, but they're also getting it from themselves, because they're going through respiration too, if that makes sense. Now, respiration is the process of exchanging oxygen and CO2 between organisms and their surroundings. And yes, plants do that as well. So plants do both. I mean, it makes sense. Plants were here long before animals, and they are not dependent on us. Although I know many teachers tell you they are. They are not. Yes? Yeah, exactly. So carbon is also released in the atmosphere in the process of combustion. Lighting stuff on fire, right? The burning of a substance. When you burn a substance, you combine the carbon in that tree that you're burning with the oxygen in the air, creating CO2. Yes?
On our last test, there was something about, like, if you burn paper and
Chemical change?
that, like create the same, like a heavier mass or something like that.
I'd have to look at it directly, so show it to me a little bit, and we'll see where you're what you were missing there. Did you miss that one? I don't know. Well, I might have been talking about a chemical change. That's ringing a bell. Or if you light something on fire, it's a chemical change, because you're changing what it actually is chemically. But we'll look at it. Well, it would stay the same because of the law of conservation of mass, yes. In the system. It's talking about the whole system. Okay. Yeah. No, this is a little different. So fossil fuels are going to be formed from the remains of dead plants and animals, which are made of carbon, and the burning of fossil fuels releases CO2 into the atmosphere. And we know we burn fossil fuels like oil and coal to generate electricity and to power our vehicles. Now, I really want us all to understand what we're doing when we do that. And I'm here to tell you, I am not a hippie. I'm not like some extremist. But here's what I am. I'm what I call a common sense person. I don't have like a political party I belong to. I don't have like a hidden agenda here. I really want you to just think about this in your own minds. So the CO2 that is buried deep in our earth and is fossil fuels comes from a time when who was not here? Us, because there was too much what in the atmosphere? CO2. It was toxic, like acid rain everywhere. We would not be here, okay? We couldn't breathe the air in. So what do we do when we harvest fossil fuels? We go down from a time when humans could not exist on planet Earth, and we bring them up to the surface, and we light them on fire, and we put them back in the atmosphere. That took millions of years of all these plants going through photosynthesizing, putting them in there, to a time where we evolved into something that could be here. So the question is, and this is like my point of view, that doesn't make sense to me. I think we're smarter than that as a population. Is that sustainable? Can we do that forever? No. Eventually, everybody, even people on the far other side of the spectrum, both spectrums, will agree that eventually that stuff's going to run out. Yes?
When you burn it, isn't it at it's not as intense as it was back then, so it's bearable for us to do?
No. No. It's all how much we bring back up. Yes. Like, I wouldn't even want to go to a halfway point, if it makes sense to you. You know what I mean? And eventually, we have to come up with different sources of energy. Eventually. Okay? I'm not saying it has to be done tomorrow, but I'm saying we better start putting our money other places in our things because that oil is only going to be there so long. So eventually we're going to have to go to electric and solar and wind and water. It's because inevitably the fossil fuels are not renewable. I can't wait millions of years for a can of gas, right? And so my common sense brain says, let's do it now instead of waiting until we've polluted so much and we've created a habitat where we can't even live here anymore. That doesn't make sense to me. And I don't even care about all that other argument. I'm saying, why don't you do it now instead of later? Does that make sense? I mean, the technology's here today. Why aren't we doing it? So that would be my argument. Like, why are we still burning coal? That doesn't even make sense. You know, we could put solar panels on the side of that mountain instead of dragging, coal out of it and burning it and creating a terrible place to live. That's where I stand on it. I'm not even like an extreme environmentalist type person, but I do care about living because the Earth's going to be just fine without us. I'm here to tell you. It will regenerate and be just fine without people. But I would like to be here. I want my kids to be here. I want my kids' kids to be here. So, and again, the Earth survived way worse than humans, right? This whole planet was covered in mold at one point in our history. So, kind of weird to think about. Yeah. So the carbon cycle looks something like this, right? Plants going through photosynthesis and respiration both, okay? So plants are, you can see there's an arrow right here, going through respiration along with deer and other animals, okay? Putting CO2 into the atmosphere, trees and plants taking it out, dead trees, plants, and animals going back to the earth, being taken back into some plants. Sometimes they get buried for long periods of time and become fossil fuels, and then we very smartly dig it up and burn it, okay? Which, a little bit's okay. I like to have a campfire, but I don't want to have a forest fire. I guess that's kind of the concept in my brain of where I go with this, Like, yeah, we probably still need gas for tractors and things like that, but we probably don't need to drive every day with them, right, and burn them in our house. So I think that's where I fall. Yeah, like maybe a little's okay, but not, use it at a sustainable rate, I would say. And there's a lot of politicians that lie to you about stuff on both ends of the spectrum. Just use your common sense in everything you learn in class and look at it and say, that doesn't make sense what you're saying. You know what I mean? They used to think oil was an inexhaustible supply of energy, and that was back in the 50s. We've come a long way since the 50s. We understand that it will run out eventually. Okay. All right, I am going to stop because